This week's episode is sponsored by Neon's film, Presence, directed by Steven Soderbergh and written by David Koepp. Presence is a thrilling new ghost story about a family that moves into a new home only to discover that they are not alone. Starring Lucy Liu, Chris Sullivan, and Julia Fox, Presence has been hailed as one of the scariest movies you'll see this year. Experience it in theaters on January 24th.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
Hello, and welcome to Scare You to Sleep. I'm Shelby Novak, and I'm here to read you some true stories sent in by your fellow listeners. I won't talk in length about the wildfires here in Los Angeles. I'm very tired and very heartbroken, but I knew that a lot of you had questions, so I wanted to just mention it up top. I'm beyond fortunate. I still have my home intact, and I am physically safe. So thank you so much to the many of you who reached out to check on me during this time. I won't be able to answer all of you, but every message meant so much to me. My power has been going in and out, so apologies if this episode is late. I'm hoping the worst of the outages are over, but honestly, this week has been full of surprises. Maybe I'll talk more about it on Patreon, the whole experience, but for now, I just want to talk about scary stuff with you. So thank you for all your concern and love and continued support. Now, on to the scary stories. Our first submission is from Jay from Czechia. That's where my last name is from, Jay. This is the 305 incident. First of all, I have to come clean that alcohol did feature on in this experience, and it maybe could explain some parts, but definitely not all that happened. Part 1, the introduction. This event took place one fall day in 2012 in the university town of Pardubice, a Czech city known for its university, gingerbread, and chemical industry. I was in college then, studying to get a bachelor's degree in English language, which I never got. Different, much more boring story. I was living in dormitory B, an 8-story apartment building built for students. I shared a room with a cool guy back then, and the room number was 205, the 5th room on the left from the stairs on the 2nd floor. Part 2, the build-up. I had a couple friends in dorm D. They had this particular way to get a party going. It was called the vase. This was a 5-liter blue vase that was usually filled with 4 liters of Coca-Cola and 1 liter of mid-range rum, plus citrus fruits and ice. I don't remember how many vases I partook from. They usually refilled it with rum, no Coke. So a couple of drinks in, I had to go, since the time was around 11 at night and I had classes in the morning. Very tipsy, I made my way back to my room, had a chat with my roommate, took off my clothes, and went to sleep. Until I had to get up to pee. Part 3, the incident. Now, this is where things get strange. I went outside of my room just in my underwear, didn't even take my slippers. The cold tiles felt nice on my hot, drunken feet. From my room, I had to turn left and take the 3rd door to get into the communal bathroom. I did the deed, came out, and tried to open the door to my room. It was locked. I panicked for a bit, realizing I didn't take my keys with me and thought that my roommate might have locked up. I tried the door handle again, and that's when I looked up at the room number written clearly on the door, 305. What did this mean? I was one floor higher. Confused, I turned right into the hallway in order to go to the stairwell. I walked past rooms 304, 303, 302, 301, and I reached the stairwell. There, I heard a creepy old-school Nokia ringtone. Someone was sitting on the stairs, and his phone was playing the old MIDI Christmas tune. I had a very strange feeling about the man in front of me. It just didn't feel right. Sobering up in these seconds, I decided to sneak to the elevator and call it here. The man just sat there. No movement, just the ringtone playing. When the elevator arrived, I sneaked in, went down one floor, and made my way to my room. On my left, I saw room numbers, 201, 202, 203, 204, 205. The creepy damn music still playing behind me. The door to my room was just as I left it, slightly open. My clothes were on my chair, and my roommate asleep. I got into my room and freaked out and went to sleep. I ran scenarios in my head on how the hell did I get there. I would have had to walk up the stairs and up one flight all the way to the toilet. The trip would take at least 2 minutes sober. I have no memory of doing that. Maybe I passed out and someone carried me up there as a prank, but that's unlikely. I weighed over 240 pounds back then. I can't imagine someone being able to carry me. Maybe something else happened. I'll never really know. And Jay added a diagram of the floor layout. Maybe I'll put that on Instagram. Thanks for reading. Love the show. Big fan. Thank you so much. That is such a trippy story. I mean, how you ended up on a completely different floor. Like, look, being blackout drunk will have you doing some strange things that you don't remember, but it is weird that you would, just because I feel like you would be in kind of muscle memory mode to just go to the bathroom. I can't imagine why you'd go all the way up to another floor, like take the stairs, and then the creepy person on the stairs. Yeah, this, I don't know. My brain is wanting this to be a time slip because I want everything to be a time slip. By the way, you mentioned the vase here. Maybe it's regional, but I think it's pretty, it's in a lot of places in America. We call something like that jungle juice, and you just put, it's not really necessarily Coke though, but you said there was like other stuff like citrus fruits in it, but it's usually just like whatever you have in your fridge or in your house or whatever you picked up at the gas station, juice, liquor, whatever, and you pour it all into, a vase is classy. In my experience, it was always just like a cooler or a big jug, like one of those Gatorade jug things. Not that I would ever partake in something like that. But anyway, oh, the good old days. But yeah, that's interesting. Thank you so much, Jay. And by the way, I forgot to mention this up top, but my first few stories are very international. I didn't mean to. It's just, it makes me so happy because I feel like my listenership is going beyond America, and that makes me so happy, or at least Northern America. And it tickles me to no end. So I really appreciate all of my international listeners. And whenever I've never traveled much in my life, unfortunately. I've just never had like the means to do so. And so I get like, I feel little bits of like, I've gone like, I don't know, I feel like part of my soul has gone to these places when I get stories from you or find out that you're listening to me in your part of the world. So I really appreciate it. So our next story is from Martha. I remember when I was a little girl, about 7 years old. My parents, my sister, and I moved into a new house in a gated community in Medellin. It was a beautiful place and a dream come true for my parents. The house was brand new, 3 stories tall. The first floor had the living room, kitchen, a bathroom, and a patio. On the second floor, there were 2 bedrooms and another bathroom. My sister and I shared one room, while the other was used as a study. The top floor belonged to my parents, their private retreat. The neighborhood was idyllic, and I quickly made friends with about 10 kids around my age. We played all sorts of games, hide and seek, ringing doorbells and running away, the usual childhood mischief. But one day, something happened that marked the beginning of a string of chilling events. We decided to play with a Ouija board. Of course, it wasn't a real one, just something we improvised by scribbling the symbols and letters on a piece of paper. We began the session nervously, laughing and shivering with fear, calling out, "Chew, are you here?" over and over again. Before anything significant could happen, panic set in and we all ran away, terrified by what we might have unleashed. Not long after, I began experiencing strange and unsettling things. At night, I would wake up in a cold sweat, paralyzed by an unshakable sense of dread. Something would wake me, a rhythmic, deliberate sound of footsteps approaching my room. I heard faint, eerie music like a warped lullaby, and muffled whispers that seemed to come from all around me. On the ceiling, bizarre symbols appeared, shapes I couldn't recognize, like malformed circles or abstract deformities. The sight of them filled me with terror, as though they were alive and watching me. Terrified, I would tiptoe upstairs to my parents' room, pressing my back against the wall as I climbed the stairs, feeling as though something unseen was chasing me, eager to do me harm. On some nights, as I lay in bed, horrifying images would flash in my mind. My parents lying in coffins, lifeless. I would cry myself to sleep, filled with anguish and fear. My sister, who shared the room with me, also witnessed strange behaviors. She told me that sometimes, in the dead of night, I would get out of bed without saying a word, stand motionless, and stare at her while she was watching TV. Then, I would wander to the bathroom and watch her from the hallway. She was terrified, unsure whether to wake me, as I seemed to be in some kind of trance. She would gently call my name until I snapped out of it. These experiences continued as I grew older. I didn't talk about them with my family, but eventually, I discovered that my mother and sister were also having their own disturbing encounters. My father dismissed it all as imagination or sleep paralysis, always offering rational explanations. But his skepticism didn't lessen the horror we were living. My mother, once a vibrant woman, fell into a deep depression. Her marriage began to deteriorate, and she felt an oppressive darkness creeping into her life. One day, while we were at school and my father was at work, she stayed home to rest. As she drifted between wakefulness and sleep, she heard heavy footsteps on the stairs, the unmistakable sound of my father's shoes. When she tried to open her eyes or move, she was paralyzed. Something entered the room, circling her bed in a strange, deliberate dance. She felt an overwhelming, malevolent energy pressing down on her. Then, it spoke. Its voice guttural and inhuman. She prayed fervently until she was finally able to move, crawling out of the room in tears. She shared this with my father, but he dismissed it as a vivid dream or sleep paralysis. The incidents only intensified. My mother felt an ominous presence watching her at night, and the sound of footsteps and disembodied whispers became a nightly occurrence. In desperation, my mother called a priest to bless the house, but instead of bringing peace, it seemed to provoke whatever was there. Lights flickered on and off at all hours, bottles shattered inexplicably, and windows broke without cause, once injuring a cousin who was visiting. Chairs were dragged across floors, beds shifted, and faint laughter echoed through the halls. We would rush upstairs to investigate, only to find empty rooms. Even our neighbors weren't spared. My mother's best friend, who had always dismissed her experiences and mocked her fears, was one of the skeptics. Until we moved. Not long after, she called my mother crying. She admitted that similar, terrifying things had begun happening in her home. She recounted one night that she was lying in bed, and something emerged from her closet. It flew across the room, landing on top of her, and began touching her face. But it wasn't human. The hand was deformed, missing fingers, cold and unnatural. Terrified, she called a priest to bless her home. The priest told her that there was a malevolent spirit there and prayed to banish it. But the activity never stopped. She later told us that no one ever stayed in our old house for more than 6 months after we moved, out of fear. For 8 long years, we endured the torment. Things reached a peak when we got a German Shepherd. We loved him dearly and felt safer with him around. But at night, he would growl and bark at empty corners, his hackles raised. On one occasion, while I was home alone, I locked myself in my parents' room, too scared to stay downstairs. From behind their locked door, I heard cabinets slamming, bags rustling, and low murmurs. The dog growled fiercely at the door, as if guarding me from something I couldn't see. The breaking point came when we woke up one night to find the dog convulsing violently. The vet diagnosed him with epilepsy, requiring lifelong medication. But after we finally moved, the seizures stopped completely. Years later, while visiting Medellin, I passed by that house. As I stared at the window of the study where so much had happened, I saw a face staring back at me, twisted, deformed, and utterly horrifying. It's a memory that still haunts me, and though we've long since left that house, the fear it instilled remains deeply ingrained. Wow. Thank you, Martha. I don't even know what to say. It was like I was reading the synopsis of a horror movie. I can't imagine experiencing all that. The fear and the horror and the dread and the somnambulism and the sleep paralysis. I know you said it's not sleep paralysis, but I do feel like sleep paralysis can be a symptom of something going on, way to control you, because you can't move. And I've spoken about this on the show before, but I've experienced sleep paralysis several times. I've never had the experience, though, that so many have, where they say they see something in the room with them. I was always just frozen and thought I was dying. But it sounds like all of you saw something in the room with you. The neighbor, that story. Again, I could see it playing out in my head like a movie. You're a fantastic storyteller, by the way. You should write more. You're a very good storyteller. But this is, again, I am so sorry you went through this, and I hope everything is better now, and I hope you don't experience any horrific hauntings. I guess it's a haunting. Wow, that's interesting. Again, for the millionth time on the show, don't play with Ouija boards. They're dangerous. Our next submission is from James. Hi, Shelby. This is a true story about a creepy experience I had camping alone in the Carpathian Mountains. I told you this was an international episode. In 1998, I was 16 and living in a country in Eastern Europe. You could see the Carpathian foothills from the town where I lived. These hills are a part of a mountain range with a long and creepy history. There are stories of forest spirits and mountain ghosts, and they are even home to Dracula's castle. I had made up my mind to do an overnight stay in these foothills. I decided to minimalist camp, taking only a sleeping bag and a few basic supplies. My plan was to get a ride part of the way and then hike deep enough into the forest where I wouldn't have to worry about encountering anyone after dark. After my ride dropped me off miles along an old logging road, I hiked straight into the woods. There were no trails here, just rolling hills separated by small valleys stretching away for miles. I picked a big hill I could see and hiked to the top of it, where I felt I was isolated enough to safely make camp. Because I'd brought so little equipment, it took me under an hour to set up my sleeping area, make a fire, and cook and eat my dinner. By the time I was done, it was nearly dark under the tall trees, but looking up, I could see through the foliage that outside the trees it was still daylight. Inside the whole forest was cast in a dim twilight. I began to find it a little unnerving. I explored the area around my camp while waiting for it to get dark enough to go to bed. I was pretty familiar with these forests, but they always looked very unremarkable in the daytime. I hadn't anticipated feeling afraid all the way out there, but I was beginning to admit to myself that I was, in fact, a little terrified. I quickly worked myself up into a state of mild panic. The glimpses of blue sky I could see began turning gray as the forest grew darker, and that's when I noticed what sounded like 2 female voices in conversation somewhere nearby. Almost as soon as I could hear them, my panic began to dissolve. I suddenly felt a little silly feeling scared because apparently 2 hikers were out there enjoying an off-trail hike at dusk, and they didn't sound afraid. I felt foolish thinking I'd hiked deep into the woods to find what I thought was an isolated spot, and here someone was about to stroll right through it. Expecting them to hike into view any moment, I sheepishly stood up in my little camp, feeling a little embarrassed and ready to greet whoever it was and avoid startling them as they approached in the gloom. The voices were so clear, I actually began to develop an impression of the speakers. One voice definitely seemed older and more energetic, while the other was softer and sounded like it might be that of a younger person. I remember these impressions being so strong that I became eager to lay eyes on the hikers just to see if my impressions were wildly off or not. No one ever appeared. The voices were suddenly gone at one point. I listened for a little while and could hear nothing but forest sounds. I got up and walked into the trees in the direction I'd heard the voices to see if maybe they'd turned around and were walking back down the hill, now in silence for some reason. I thought that maybe they'd seen me and I'd frightened them off, alone out here in the woods. I reached a clearing where I could look down the whole hillside. When I stepped into the clearing, I realized it wasn't as dark as it seemed to be among the trees. The sun had just gone down, but it still lit the sky, so I was able to see all the way down the hill in all directions. And no one was in sight. No hikers could have made it out of sight in the short time since the voices had stopped. It would have taken the better part of an hour to get all the way down that hill. I couldn't even hear the sound of anyone scrambling down the steep hillside through leaves and branches. There was no trail to walk on, which I knew because this was the way I'd come up to. I watched the hillside below until I was sure I was completely alone. That's when I realized I'd never made out a single word I'd overheard. Not a sound I'd heard formed any kind of word I could recognize. It had been like listening to a conversation happening in the next room, but not quite being able to make out the words, just the tone. Despite being surprised, instead of feeling creeped out by the vanishing voices, I felt calm. I don't know why I suddenly felt totally okay with mystery voices deep in the woods after dark, but I guess they sounded so familiar and unthreatening that I felt reassured. Instead of panicking, I returned to camp and went to bed. That night turned into a very long one, but to my surprise, I did actually manage to sleep some. Despite a few concerning moments listening to foraging wildlife in the dark, the rest of the night was completely uneventful. In the morning, I hiked out feeling proud of having accomplished my goal of an overnight stay in the woods. Because I had no answer for the voices I'd heard, I didn't tell anyone about them. After a night in the woods, I definitely had a couple good stories to share, but I've kept these voices to myself. Until now. Thank you for reading my story, if you've made it this far. Thank you so much, James, and that story sounds so much like the thing that I experienced. I've told the story on the show, I think, several times, so I won't rehash the whole thing, but that I experienced on this battlefield in Mississippi, where I heard voices. I couldn't see them, the people connected to the voices, and it was the same thing like you described. I couldn't piece out what exactly they were saying. Like, I could never remember any words or remember being able to pick out any particular words or phrases. And the way you explained it, like it was someone in another room and you could hear them like through a wall, that's exactly what it sounds like. I've been told something like this is possibly a time slip, or maybe a residual haunting, some energy, spirits, energy, whatever you'd like to call it, whatever you believe in, just kind of going about there. Like it's like an imprint almost. I don't know if it's intelligent, or it could be. Mine, I have to admit, felt intelligent. It felt like they could see me and I couldn't see them. And I can't tell you why I felt that way because, again, I couldn't make out exactly what they were saying. But yeah, things like this are just give me so much joy because there's so much mystery in the world. And, this is so unexplainable. Who knows what happened? But I believe you. I believe you heard these voices. And interesting that you even picked out that they were two different people and kind of getting an idea of what they each, who they each were and maybe what they looked like and things. You're probably getting like a picture in your mind. And that's so fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing. I really enjoyed this story. This next submission is from Alicia, and she titled it, Lurking in the Void. Hello, Shelby. I live in a tiny town in Wisconsin called Delavin? I apologize, Wisconsinites. I don't know how to pronounce that. My boyfriend at the time, we'll call him Jay, and I moved into a house on the outskirts. It was nestled in a rural area where the roads were barely lit and the nearest neighbor was more of a shadow in the distance. The only sounds at night were the distant howls of coyotes, their eerie cries echoing through the trees like something out of a nightmare. The house was small, a modest 2-bedroom, 1-bath cottage, but the yard, it was expansive, a sprawling stretch of green with a deck that could have been perfect for quiet summer evenings. The kind of place you dream of when you want peace and solitude. It never crossed my mind that the property might be haunted. Not then. Growing up with siblings who had a knack for tormenting me with ghost stories made me an easy target for fear. But I convinced myself I was above it, too old and too logical to fall for those old, childish tales. At first, the oddities were subtle, almost nothing at all. A flicker of movement in the corner of my eye when I passed by the bedroom, a strange pressure in the air, like someone was standing too close. And then, waking up at exactly 3 a.m., my heart hammering in my chest, certain I was being watched, but finding nothing when I turned to look. The anxiety began to gnaw at me slowly, creeping in during those quiet moments when I was home alone for too long, like something lurking just beyond my perception. At first, I brushed it off, just my imagination, but the longer we stayed, the more it became clear that something was wrong. One night, while Jay and I were sleeping, I woke up suddenly, my eyes heavy with sleep, my mind fogged and disoriented. The room felt unnaturally cold, and as my blurred vision began to clear, I saw someone, moving in the darkness. It was Jay, or at least it looked like him. His figure was moving slowly, unnaturally, pacing back and forth just beside the bed, his silhouette barely distinguishable in the faint moonlight filtering through the curtains. I blinked, trying to focus, my heart picking up speed. "What are you doing?" I whispered, my voice thick with sleep and confusion. But there was no answer. The figure didn't stop or even acknowledge me. I sat up, confused and uneasy, my pulse hammering in my ears. That's when my breath caught in my throat. Jay was lying beside me, asleep, his chest rising and falling rhythmically. A chill ran down my spine as my mind struggled to piece it together. Was I dreaming? No, this felt too real, too wrong. I forced myself to look away from the shadowy figure that still paced beside the bed, trying not to let it see that I was awake. The air in the room felt thick, as if it was holding its breath, waiting. Slowly, I pulled the covers tighter around myself, shut my eyes, and willed myself to stay still, praying that whatever it was, it wouldn't notice me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching. Jay didn't believe me when I mentioned the shadowy figure. He's always been a skeptic. The figure kept returning. One night, I climbed into bed, feeling the familiar weight of Jay settling beside me. But when I turned over to face him, the spot was empty. Jay wasn't there. Another time, I walked into the bedroom and my blood ran cold. There, in the corner of the room, crouched the entity, its form impossibly still. Not long after I started seeing the shadow figure, Jay was in a motorcycle accident. He was hospitalized for what felt like an eternity, leaving me alone in that house, in the dark. Before bed every night, I followed the same ritual, turning on the TV, leaving the living room light on, and keeping my phone within arm's reach, as if those small comforts could ward off whatever was lurking. One evening, I had a dream, or nightmare, the blurred line between reality and something far darker. In this dream, Jay was finally discharged from the hospital. I heard the faint sound of footsteps outside the back door. Jay reached under the doormat for the spare key and entered the house. I watched him slowly move through the hallway, his presence familiar yet unsettling. He made his way to the bedroom, stood over me, and then crouched down beside the bed. In a hushed, urgent whisper, he breathed into my ear, "Someone is in the house." I woke up in a panic, gasping for air, heart pounding in my chest. The room was pitch black. The silence was deafening. My hands fumbled in the dark as I scrambled for my phone, my pulse racing. I shot up, frantic, and flipped the light on, casting long, harsh shadows across the room. My mind raced as I rushed through the house, checking every corner. I texted Jay in a daze, asking, "Did you come home?" His reply came almost instantly. "No, I haven't been discharged yet." A few days later, Jay was discharged from the hospital. I was working the night shift at the time, while he remained at home on short-term disability. Gradually, he began to understand that what I had been saying about the entity and the unsettling atmosphere in the house was true. He eventually confided in me that he too was beginning to feel uneasy being alone at home. After that nightmare of an experience, I knew I needed help. The fear was starting to swallow me, and I didn't know where else to turn. So I reached out to my oldest sister, the only one in the family who was deeply religious. She listened quietly as I explained everything, and without hesitation, she gave me a Bible and a framed picture of the Lord's Prayer. "This should help," she said, her voice calm but firm. She also told me to burn sage throughout the house, a ritual to ward off any unwanted spirits. I did as she suggested. The house remained silent after that. No more shadows, no more strange occurrences. It was as if the darkness had dissipated, or maybe it was just waiting, lurking. Either way, in the span of a year, Jay and I broke up, and I packed up and left. I moved out and hoped whatever had haunted that place stayed behind, tied to Jay where it belonged. Thank you so much for taking the time to read my story. I truly hope it sends shivers down your spine. I can't wait for more chilling tales. Alicia. Alicia, that was fantastic. Again, I think it was Martha earlier, I said, you're a fantastic storyteller. So bravo on that. You should consider writing some fiction. That was great. I mean, the situation wasn't great. I feel weird, giving you acclaim for your writing skills when you were like, here's this horrific thing that happened to me. Horrifying, very scary. A lot of dark shadow figures, huh? Tonight. Check the corners of your room tonight. When you go to sleep, there could be a dark shadow figure lurking or crouching. Ooh, the crouching one. What is it about figures crouching that makes it scarier? At least to me, because once your figure, Alicia, was crouching, oof. I know that pressure feeling you're talking about. I'm sure everyone does. And I swear I felt it just a little earlier. Sometimes when I'm reading these True Stories episodes, I do get the heebie-jeebies a little bit. I'm sure some of it is just in my head, psychosomatic, because I am reading all these. But yeah, I thought my cat walked behind me earlier, and I looked, and she hadn't. She was still sleeping in her little box, and that was creepy. Ugh, I'm giving myself the chills, as if I haven't had a long enough week. Now I've got to deal with ghosts. But yeah, that was very scary. Thank you again, Alicia. And we have one last story for the evening. This one was sent in by someone who asked to remain anonymous. Hi, Shelby. I discovered your podcast a few months ago, and I'm currently listening to all the episodes from the start. Oof, those early ones are rough. I've just listened to the True Horror episode from September 2023, number 15. Love the show and thought I'd send my true horror story. I understand if you don't use it. Well, guess what? I am. Here goes. First, a bit of context. I've always been very empathetic, and the moods of others around me used to seriously affect me. I've learned how to shut them out now, but when I was a kid, the emotions of those around me would bring me down/up, etc. I should also mention, physical contact makes it much stronger. So when I was about 14, I went into town to spend my pocket money, allowance, alone. I was looking in a shop window at something when someone bumped into me and knocked me down. The man apologized and offered his hand to help me up. As I took his hand, my whole body suddenly felt cold, and I experienced some extremely strong negative emotions that I don't even have a name for and have never experienced since. My flight instinct kicked into overdrive and I ran away. I ran until I couldn't run anymore and my lungs felt like they were on fire. I went home and tried to forget about it, but I felt sick. That night, I had horrible nightmares all night. The next day, while I was at home, my mom had the news on TV and they showed a picture of the man that bumped into me. Turns out, when he bumped into me, he was on his way home to kill his wife and kids. I don't think I was in any danger from him, but it did terrify me and give me nightmares on and off for years. Please don't mention my name in this story, as I told friends about it and they accused me of using a local tragedy for attention seeking. Thanks. Love the show. Keep up the good work. X. Thank you, Anonymous. I thought that was a really good one to close off our episode for the night, because that is terrifying. I can't imagine seeing that man on the news. And that's another thing that comes up quite a bit. We had one, was it last True Horror episode? And it was a waitress, and she spoke to a famous killer, and she said that she got really bad vibes off him. And man, it's crazy how often that happens. So thank you so much. And I hope I hope those nightmares wore off over the years. Thank you to all of my submitters tonight. If you'd like your true story told on the show, go ahead and send it to scareyoutosleep@gmail.com. Please put true story in the subject line, just so I know which little folder to put it in. I try to be somewhat organized in my emails, so if you do that, I will put it in the right folder, and it'll be easier, a better chance to be considered on the show. So do that. Again, that's scareyoutosleep@gmail.com. And again, we don't take just okay, I say we a lot. I get a lot of emails that are like, to the cast and crew of Scare You to Sleep. And I'm like, hello, here we all are living inside my head. We all here at Scare You to Sleep, Clara and I, what was I even going to say? Oh, you can send in, it doesn't have to be paranormal. It can be totally just a true interaction, a very scary interaction. It can be UFOs. It doesn't have to be ghosts. This one happened to be a lot of ghosts. Well, that last one wasn't ghosts. That was, I don't know what you would call that. Very good intuition and touch psychic. I don't know what you would call it, but we take all kinds of scary stories. I keep saying we still. Great. It's been a long week. Again, okay, we're not in the ramble yet. Follow the show on social media, all the social media at Scare You to Sleep. You can follow me personally at Shelby B. Novak on all the socials as well. And I'm a little more active on my personal stuff. If you'd like to see more of me, I don't know. And you can, again, scareyoutosleep@gmail.com to submit any true stories or fictional stories. Again, we mostly do fictional stories, so send those in as well. And you can, if you'd like ad-free episodes and bonus episodes, you can go to patreon.com/scareyoutosleep. There are different tier levels. And I had a full-length bonus episode for Patreon that I am halfway done with. Like a full-length episode, but it's only going to be Patreon exclusive. And then guess what day I was working on that? Tuesday, when all the fires broke out. So I apologize for that. Again, I have not had power consistently in the last few days. So it's just been a little wonky. It's been, it's fine. It's fine. Remember last week? It's fine. It's all fine. I said that so many times last week. Guess what? Joke's on me. So, yeah, do all that. I think that's all the housekeeping I have for right now. We can go into the ramble. Let's just do it. I'm sure I'm forgetting something. I'm very tired. I haven't slept very well because of the fires. Because I just have to keep... The first couple nights I didn't sleep at all. I was up for 48 hours because I didn't know if I could evacuate. At one point, I was not in an evacuation zone, but all the major roads around me were closed because a lot of people have been posting pictures of like where they're at in relation to the fires. I haven't done that because I don't want to dox myself. I've gotten some concerning emails recently that I'm just like, better not. But just so you know, I am in the middle of all the fires. They create a circle around me. So it's actually turned out to be a fortunate place to be because they stayed in that circle around me. But, the first night was terrifying. Didn't know what was going to happen. And all the roads were closed off around me. And the power kept going out. And because of the extreme winds, that's another thing I'm sure a lot of you around the world, across the country, know about the fires. They were propelled by, we were having hurricane force winds. I think they got up to 105 miles per hour. And so the winds, it was like living in a fucking apocalypse. It was very scary. Again, I am fortunate. I don't even like to really complain because so many people lost everything they have. And it's been really hard watching so many places that I have so many memories of just being absolutely gone. They're gone. And this has been really psychologically hard this week. So I apologize if I'm a little bit of a mess. I've been trying to, again, answer some of your questions. I've had some people be like really weird and insensitive. I don't know. It's been weird. And again, then maybe they're not even being, and I'm just a little bit of a sensitive place right now. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for those of you hanging in there with me, because it's been, it's been a weird time. Last year was the divorce. This year, then now that was the year before the whole scary leaving my home situation that you bared with me through, moving again, surgery, my grandmother dying. Now I got the news, like I said, I mentioned it a little bit, which, by the way, I appreciate those of you who have been sending me help. I would take any help you can give me about insurance appeals, because I'm new to this world, and my emergency surgery was denied by my insurance for some reason. The reasons they gave were really nonsensical, honestly, and so I'm going to have to fight all of that, and, God, life-ruining amounts of medical bills. That was all earlier this week, or like part of last week into earlier this week, and then the fires happened, and a lot of things. It's, again, I still consider myself fortunate because so many people have lost everything, and I hate to complain. It's just, I wanted to explain how all of this is basically compounded, and it's honestly all of you that you're the reason I'm still standing, and I am not. This show gives me a reason to be around still, and to be just, really plugging away. This is my passion, and I get to do this is my dream. This is my dream, and I thank you for all of you who are around, who support the Patreon, who listen on the regular feed, because that ad revenue is where I make most of what pays these medical bills, is on the normal feed, and I appreciate that. So thank you for wherever you listen. I just thank you. And again, I might sound crazy. I feel weird, because I feel like there have been the reason I mentioned all that shit is in the last 2 years, year and a half, I don't know how long, you've heard me come on and be like, hey, I just had the worst day of my life. And it's just like the worst day of my life for like the last year or so. And it's just been really weird. And again, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to I don't know if any of my friends listen to this show. Well, I do know one of them does. Hi, Rosemary. But I don't know if anyone else does. But I truly have the greatest friends and colleagues who are friends, and vice versa, because they've been really great. And again, because of you and because of them, I'm just still plugging away over here. I'm from Southern California. I'm not new to fires, but this is something that is of a magnitude no one's ever seen before. I just read that it's the most expensive fire in U.S. history. It's like $50 billion, and it was absolutely terrifying. It was, again, 105 mile per hour winds plus fire literally in a circle all around you it's something. I'll tell you that. It's something. Anyway, we're going up. I left last week saying it's fine over and over. Maybe that's not the way to go, but it's fine. What else can I say? I'm honestly so fortunate, so blessed, because I am still in my home. And so you know what? Because of that, it is fine. And I was right last week. It is fine. And everything else will be fine. Again, if you have any insight into medical billing, feel free to reach out to me, just because I'm new to all of this and it scares me. But other than that, I think you should all have a fantastic weekend. I'm going to pick up my broken brain, all the pieces of it, and put it back together inside my head. And we'll all get through this together. And I'm going to look for ways to help around my community, because it's definitely going to need it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to me ramble. Oh, no, I didn't bake anything this week. I'm sure you can understand why. So, sorry, no baking corner. Maybe next week. Catch ya on the flip side. Okay, go get some sleep. Sweet dreams.